YouTube, hello, welcome back to Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis. Today we're going to be doing a character guide for Glenn, and this one is going to be pretty quick. We're going to start it a little bit differently this time. I normally kept the builds that I thought were a little less efficient or were limited at the back half of the video because I felt like they were still viable, but not necessarily the way that you would like to build them. I'm actually going to open with Glenn's two least likely to be used this wave builds, just to kind of go over where he can be built and can be used but likely isn't the most efficient way, and then we're going to have a more detailed conversation about where Glenn is at currently once we start getting into the builds that he is more likely to use when you're building a team. So we're going to open up with the Ice DPS build. This actually utilizes the two weapons that Glenn got for free just for logging in during Anniversary. Uses the Blade of Ruin, which does a 940% physical ice damage attack. Also provides Provoke, while also increasing the command gauge by 20%. The command gauge, for folks that don't know, is that little red diamond that's off to the right of your game when you're going to fight. So this gets your command gauge filled up faster, which gets you to your maximum DPS faster, which also enables things like physical ability potency, the extra 15% damage that you get once that diamond is filled out, or on co-ops, it goes even higher. So very, very solid R abilities with physical attack 62 and ice potency 39. Solid physical attack at 120 at 684. Good materia slots for an offensive, for a weapon that does this type of damage. I shouldn't say offensive weapon, but still pretty good sigil abilities or materia slots. I have all brands for defensive stuff because this is mostly a defensive weapon. Using Automatic in his offhand, gives him boost attack and boost physical ability potency with a really solid physical attack stat and a decent non-elemental attack, which we'll go over that later. Brands on this one, I usually just do physical attack. Obviously, ultimate weapon. Now, the limit break here, if you're looking to make him a DPS, you're probably going to give Diamond Dust, just Shiva's Diamond Dust, just because he's got all of the ice potency materials and such. So make sure that you've got the Shiva on there. I'm using ice potency materials. And then for sub weapons, I'm using the Defender, which gives us some boost heal that we don't need, but it gives us that 52 points of ice potency. That's going to get his ice potency to that ice potency to that level 8 breakpoint that gives us that 100% bonus damage. And then I gave him the enemy launcher, which you'll notice that on most physical damage builds that we've done, I like to use this one because it's got a really good physical attack stat, great R abilities for a physical build. But key here is that this weapon with a physical attack all allies and physical ability potency sub weapon got him to the level 7 break. So we didn't actually need to put on both 56 point physical ability potency weapons because he has Automatic in his offhand, giving him that 19 to start with. So made it a little bit more flexible to give us a different set of attack, because obviously his physical attack is already maxed out at 62 just from his weapon alone, which allowed us then to go into physical attack all allies, giving us a 14% boost instead of looking at attack and just getting a 5% boost. So it's a 9% increase in total DPS, which is great, and it also increases your entire team's DPS by 14%, which is obviously very good. Overall, it's not a bad build. It does still service in ice teams, and obviously his physical attack is high enough that it will do damage, like a significant amount of damage, especially if you have some support for this build. However, the reason that it holds Glenn back specifically is because his overspeed is a tank overspeed. And the reason why that matters for folks that are newer to the game is that the attacker overspeed roll, which is what we've done for all of our character guides so far, gives extra damage to their roll once they're in that overspeed roll. So as you can see here, in Glenn's overspeed, his nodes gave 1500 HP, 18 defense, and 18 both defenses, right? 18 of physical and magic defense. Then it also gave fire resistance, ice resistance, lightning resistance, earth resistance, water resistance, and wind resistance when this tank tuning is activated, right? Which also gives him, by the way, an additional 20% to both of his defenses, making him incredibly tanky, right? Incredibly tanky. What an offensive character gives, we'll just go to Tifa as the example, they get 1500 HP and then 300 to both magic and physical attack. And then when they activate their overspeed, they're getting potencies, right? So they're getting an extra 10% to all the elemental potencies, meaning that their damage is just naturally going to be higher, right? 300 points is not a small number when we're talking about all the percentages and stuff when we increase these character stats. So 300 is a pretty significant upgrade. And then on top of that, they're getting a 10% bonus to that elemental damage, making this much better for elemental builds. That said, it's not a bad build still. Obviously, Glenn is still able to do some solid ice damage. 940% is not a low figure in this game. And the additional benefits that this provides, meaning the Provoke, to make sure that they're attacking Glenn, and then increasing the command gauge. Both of these are very good effects. And even though you're building Glenn as the offensive unit here, you can see his defenses are still very, very high with the weapon, with the way that we've got this currently built out. So it's still solid. He'll still be able to do a significant amount of damage, and he still can be your primary DPS in a fight when you're going into ice. It's just not as efficient as it would be for, say, like Tifa and her ice build, right? Next up is a limited build, and it's his water DPS build. This is built around his recently buffed Stream Slasher, which now does the same at OB10. It does up to a 900% physical water damage, also decreases the physical defense of the enemy, also gives Glenn a Veil, also has Diamond Sigil Break. So they improved this quite a bit, and it made it so that this weapon was a lot more self-sufficient and didn't require the offhand weapon that we're using in this build to enable this weapon to be good, right? So it allows Glenn to be a very good physical support for water teams, making this a very good way to be a tank on water teams, while also giving your DPSs some additional bonuses, such as the physical defense down, having Diamond Sigil Break, and making sure that he's veiling himself to allow him to then take on those single target attacks, or even the AoE attacks, a little bit better than he did previously. Before, it only did 900% water damage, and that's still fine, but it's just like, it was whatever, right? Now it's significantly better. Offhand weapon for the DPS build is still going to be Slay the Day, just because of the R abilities. It gives physical attack and water potency, which Glenn needs both of those in order to get to his maximum DPS values. This is what we were using before to get to the physical defense down. It was a medium decrease to physical defense instead of a high, which is what his Stream Slasher does now. But importantly, this is only 3 ATB, and it increased his water damage by 3 tiers, which is very good. Obviously, for folks who have been playing since the Ever Crisis Academy banner, you may have access to Aerith's Bamboo Team Leader Sword that gives your entire team water damage up. If you have access to that, you don't need Slay the Day anymore in his offhand. However, still gives really good R abilities, still gives you this extra water damage, which is great. And it does do a physical defense drop. So even though this one is already doing it for you now and you don't need to do that, this will continue to reapply it even when it's less than OB6, right? Because it doesn't get up to high until it gets up to that OB6 range, right? You get mid to high and then high to high at OB10. So once that medium decreases down, as I'm dealing DPS with the water damage, it's reapplying this physical defense down, making sure that that physical defense stays down as I continue to DPS. Obviously, since I'm focusing this on DPS, he's using Leviathan as well as the water potency materials. Sub-weapons here, he needs a little bit more help for physical attack, so I threw on the Tempest because this gives physical attack and water potency. Those two combined, or that combined with his 2 main hand weapons, got him up to the 65-point water potency break. This is obviously not going to be as necessary if your Stream Slasher is at a higher overboost than mine is. You may be able to just get away with having the 2 weapons and just move along. You'll only be at the level 7 break, I believe, at that point. But you might be able to put on, like, say, Tifa's feathered gloves here instead of the Tempest to get you that rest of the water potency and get you some more boost attack. But for the build that I have and the overboost that I'm at, this works the best for me. I then put on Rifle of the Hunt because it gives 46 attack and physical attack and 39 points of physical ability potency, maxing out my physical attack. And then the last weapon, obviously, was the enemy launcher because it's a physical build for just attack, and then physical ability potency to get us to that level 6 break. This puts Glenn in a pretty good position to do some decent water damage. Obviously, he is still pretty tanky overall, so he'll be able to handle any attacks that come through. His HP is a little bit lower in this build as a result, but he should be okay. 12,000 attack, again, is very solid without support characters. So, solid build overall. Still does decent in terms of just overall water DPS. There aren't a lot of really good physical water weapons in the game. The only 2 that are very, very strong are Glenn's Stream Slasher, Tifa's Shining Gloves, and then Yuffie's Bird of Prey is the other one. So those are the best physical water weapons in the game right now. Obviously, the Shining Gloves is a physical weapon that's in the featured pool, making that build a lot more reasonable to do for a physical damage build, and a lot less expensive, right? Because you don't have to pull unlimited banners, you don't have to worry about, you know, trying to get the limit break medals to get the water weapon for Glenn. It just makes it a lot easier for you to maximize your water DPS. It makes it less efficient for Glenn. Now we're going to go into the rest of his builds, which I believe are the ways that you will run Glenn in future content. So we're going to talk about his ice tank build first. You're going to notice some similarities here. He's still going to be running the Blade of Ruin because this does really solid ice damage, and it has that increased command gauge, and it gives you this provoke right off the rip. And the reason why this is important is because if you're using Glenn, it's likely because It's a single target stage that Glenn can then provoke into himself with his high defensive stats to be able to take those attacks, right? The reason why I say that is because his offhand weapon for all of these builds is going to be the Pirate Glaive. This weapon is extraordinary, like very, very good. It has both defenses for our abilities. The effect does an AoE 800% physical non-elemental damage attack, which isn't great, but it's fine. It gives Provoke, it gives Veil, and it gives your entire team HP gain. And as I've shown during the last guild battle that we had, when I showcased the Glenn team, HP gain can actually be used to keep your team healed for the most part. Obviously, with the extreme content, it gets a little bit more difficult to keep those HP levels high. But even with things like Sephiroth Original, whose overspeed turns all of your ATB to 1, and he can just sit there and spam 1 ATB moves, Sephiroth will sit there and just heal himself back to full by just spamming those 1 ATB moves while he's immune to damage, right? So HP gain is a very, very good effect, and being able to just continuously reapply this while giving yourself Provoke and giving yourself Veil and damaging the enemies in an area of effect is very, very strong. So all of his offhands for these tank builds will likely include Pirate's Glaive as a result, just because of how strong it is. My materia here are just mixed defensive materias. I've got physical defense and magic defense materias, just to try to maximize how much defenses we're going into. Sub weapons, this is a physical build, so I did include a physical sub weapon for the R ability. This one doesn't matter. It's just whatever physical attack all allies weapon you have at level 120. And then I put on 1 physical defense all allies and 1 magic defense all allies. The way that these tank rolls are going to work, and as we do the tank videos, like, don't take the sub weapons as law when it comes to the tank side, right? Whenever it comes to tanks and healers and supports, the ones who are normally not getting your primary sub weapons, right? You're always going to put sub weapons on that best fit your needs for each team, or for each event, each, encounter, right? Each whatever it is. If you're running up against a physical damage enemy, so let's say you're running up against, as an example, Titan, right? And Titan does all physical damage, right? You don't need magic defense all allies. You don't need magic defense materias, right? You would just run all physical defense. So then you would switch these sub weapons to match that of the battle that you're going up against, of the fight that you're going up against, right? If you're going up against Genova, as an example, and Genova does all magic attacks, you're not going to equip physical defense materials because you don't need physical defense materials. You need magic defense materials, etc. So keep in mind, take a look at the enemy details, go into the battle, figure out what kind of damage they're dealing, and then equip materials and sub weapons to coincide with that stage. Overall, this is a really good ice tank build. Obviously, with Provoke, any type of Provoke tank like Glenn or Angeal, if you're trying to build around Provoke, it's going to rely on a stage where they're doing single target damage. He's still usable in those AoE stages as well because of the HP gain that Pirate's Glaive gives. But this is where Glenn is kind of in a weird spot right now. Glenn has gotten a couple of really great banners recently, and this is why I wanted to keep the good banner, or the good builds, quote unquote good builds, right, for the end. He has been getting some good help in the featured pools over the last 9 months, basically throughout the entire calendar year. Once he got Blade of Ruin in January, he's been getting nothing but help in his tank role over the last 9 months, which has been great, right? It's been nice to see Glenn get some support to make him a better tank. And all of the weapons that he's received so far, thankfully, knock on wood, right? But all of the weapons that he's received so far have been awesome, right? Even the most recently released weapon, the featured weapon that just released, I think it's the Desperado Glaive. That's an earth resist down, physical attack down, veil. It does basically everything, and it's 3 ATB, which is insane. It provides so much value to you and to your team that it becomes a very automatic thing, right? The only time you're not going to be using Glenn for that earth resist down stage where you need to have a tank is if it's immune to physical attack down but not physical defense down. You would use Lucia's Rifle of the Hunt instead, because Rifle of the Hunt has a physical defense down included instead of a physical attack down, making it a better option, right, when you're trying to specifically do more damage, right? So he's going to continue to get some support as the builds continue on, and eventually he'll probably get a true blue limit break weapon that matches his overspeed role, because obviously the only limited weapon that he's really gotten has been Stream Slasher, and that Stream Slasher weapon is good right now, right? It is much better than it was before, but I wouldn't say that it's a very good identity weapon, where most of the other limit break weapons that we've seen, like if you consider Matt's Daryl Platus, it's a very good identity limit break weapon, right? It gives Matt a role on your team, right? Or the Pirate's Collar that just released for Red 13. You know, that was another one that gave Red a direction, right? It gives him a direction where he's able to buff magic attack, buff lightning potency, and do a big heal with a weapon, the Seaside Collar, that he can put in his offhand to lower lightning resistance, allowing him to really be that like premier lightning healer on your team. So hopefully they continue to put Glenn in a direction that works for him, and that he'll be able to be used on more teams right now. But you'll see that the next couple of builds, he's basically used on like 2 or 3 teams total right now. And although he's useful on those 2 or 3 teams, it is kind of nichey, right? Compared to someone like Angeal or Barrett, who have AoE buff effects. So like Angeal can buff everybody's physical attack, Barrett can buff everybody's magic attack, and they all both provide some level of like generic offensive ability that Glenn just doesn't have access to, right? He's got a single target buff, and it's just not worth even mentioning in these builds because it's just not good enough in the game anymore. So Glenn still needs some love. Hopefully that these couple of builds will help you find a way to use him. And like I said, this Ice tank build is still very, very solid, right? I used Ice Glenn in my Ifrit trials when I was trying to build teams around the free-to-play weapons that we received, and he worked just fine. So he's definitely still good. He's definitely still solid, and the physical the Ice tank build is still very good. Moving right along to another limited build, which goes around his limited Stream Slasher again. You're going to notice that this build is basically the same as the Ice build, where I'm just got physical attack all allies, physical defense all allies, magic defense all allies, but I'm instead using the Stream Slasher, which gives that physical defense down and a veil, which is super important, right? Because now we're going to be using Pirate Slave to get our provoke on and put HP gain on our entire team. After this is used, he's going to be using strictly Stream Slasher for a physical defense down, reapplying the veil, Diamond Sigil break, and some decent water damage. This is a great combination. Not that the Blade of Ruin Ice tank build is not, but this one allows you to get an offensive debuff down, which is great, continue to reapply Veil, which is awesome, and then on top of that, deal some decent water damage, which means he's helping get that HP gauge down faster, which is just solid overall. And having a Diamond Sigil break included on his DPS weapon is still very, very good, right? So this is a very good build. It's still very solid, and much like the Ice build, he definitely has some use case where this is useful. One in particular is actually the Ramu fight. Ramu does have a Diamond Sigil break phase, and his, I forget the name of the attack. It's like a lightning strike attack. It's the one that's not Judgment Bolt. It does target the highest HP unit on your team. So if you can get it to a point where Glenn is actually going to be targeted by that attack, he'll be able to tank that incredibly well, especially if you do have his limit break weapon, which gives him not only this physical resistance and I mean magical resistance when you use this, but it also, like, at the start of the fight, gives him +3 physical defense and magic defense, which is really, really good, right? Makes it very, very hard to break through Glenn, and it also gives him these really, really good individual buffs, and it allows you to more easily get your provoke back on because this has 3 casts. Most people aren't going to have access to that, obviously, so I haven't been mentioning it until now, but his ultimate weapon was very good. And it was another good addition to give him a direction, making him one of the best premier single target tanks, because he's able to have so many good ways to provoke between Pirate Slave and Blade of Ruin. But this is still a solid build. Obviously, materia is going to be the same. You're just doing mixed defenses. And then I'm using the Hell on Wheels here because this also, not only does this give him a 40% veil, which is very solid, it does a single target attack that when your HP is 80% or less, it does 2.5 times damage, so it just increases the damage here. But key is that it removes physical and magic attack up, which is very, very important. You'll notice on things like Ifrit, as an example, Ifrit is immune to physical attack and magic attack debuffs, but it is not immune to you removing that physical attack and magic attack up with a limit break. So you're able to use Hell on Wheels to remove Ifrit's buffs to allow you to survive certain hits. So solid limit break, solid build still. This water tank build is still very, very good, and probably will be very good for a while until another good water tanking support weapon comes out. But even Angeal, as an example, the 2 water weapons that he received, meaning the Mithril Slasher and the Inflatable Buster Sword, they don't provide the level of utility that this one does, right? They're still good, don't hear what I'm not saying, but like, this is solid for physical teams, where Angeal's is more focused on the magic side. Gonna move right along to the physical support build. This one's gonna be using Pirate's Glaive in the main hand and then using Hell on Wheels, or I'm sorry, using Piece of Cake in the offhand for a high physical defense decrease. If you do have the Stream Slasher at OB10, Stream Slasher replaces this just 1-to-1 because there's no reason for you to have Piece of Cake if you have Stream Slasher at OB10 because they both have a physical defense at high for 4 ATB. But Stream Slasher comes with a slew of other benefits, including Veil, Diamond Sigil Brick, better R abilities, etc. Right? Until then, Piece of Cake is perfectly fine for a -3 physical defense. Same thing with the Materia, same thing with the Limit Break. Sub weapons are going to be exactly the same. You're just building around what your team needs for those specific fights. This is going to be very useful for stages that you don't need ice or water damage, or if the enemy is resistant to ice or water damage, you can just use Pirate's Glaive as the main tool because it has Provoke and Veil built in together. So you don't need to use any other weapons. You don't need to include anything else. All you want is some way to help your team deal damage, which is why he's got this physical defense decrease. And that's pretty much it for the physical attack support build. He doesn't really do a great job with magic support. A lot of his stuff is physically focused, which makes it a bit difficult to help with magic stages. I assume that will be corrected over time, but as it stands today, Glenn is still, okay at supporting the magic side, but he just doesn't have a magic defense down weapon that's very useful, right? So until he gets one of those, or until he gets some more magic-based support, right now he's basically just a physical tank at this point, which is perfectly fine. It's nice to have characters that fill a role, right? And he does fill that role incredibly well. And then the last build I'm going to talk about today, which I think is the least relevant build so far, is the non-elemental DPS build. This one I'm using Ultimatic as the main DPS tool. This is a weapon that does 1,040% physical non-elemental damage, which is solid. Has a Circle Sigil Break included on it, which is, cool. Then it also gives us that boost attack and boost physical ability potency. I'm using the Mega Flare with all physical attack materias. I'm using Blade of Ruin just because it gives 62 physical attack, which combined with Rifle of the Hunt gets us up to the level 6 break on boost physical attack, notably. But it gets us all the way up to this level 7 break for physical ability potency, which is all that we need. But yeah, so there's some options here. Again, like it's irrelevant. There's some options here. Whatever physical attack and physical ability potency weapon that you have at OB10, I would just throw that on. I then threw on an attack all allies and ability potency sub weapon. This was just to help increase his total DPS by boosting ability potency instead of physical ability potency, because this is already maxed out. So I just switched to a different R ability and did not use physical attack all allies because the ones that I had were all physical attack and physical ability potency, which I currently don't need. For the last slot, I just gave him a boost HP weapon to make him a little bit better at tanking. And then this has some boost ability potency as well, getting us up to the level 4 break, or 22% more damage when it's at the max gauge. Overall, pretty solid here, 31,000 health, solid defensive stuff as well, so he's still able to use Provoke if you need to. But obviously he's meant to do damage here, so that's why you see the 13,672 attack. It's a solid build overall. There are better non-elemental damage dealers in the game. Even within the featured pool, there are better non-elemental featured physical weapons in the game. So it's still a solid build. Glenn can still do a lot of non-elemental damage. And if you need something like physical defense down, you can easily slap out Blade of Ruin for Piece of Cake, as an example, to get that physical defense down and let him be more of a supportive role, and then just alter your sub weapons accordingly, right? If you want Glenn doing more damage, you give him more physical attack. If you want him being tankier, you remove some of the more damage focused weapons, or defense all allies, etc. And that pretty much covers Glenn. Like I said, this is a pretty quick one. Glenn is a pretty niche character at this point in the game. Like I said, I really hope that they continue to give him more banners that will continue to improve his kit overall. The last 3 banners that he's received, including this last Earth one, the Pirate's Glaive, and the Blade of Ruin, all 3 of those weapons have been very, very strong, and they're very, very good additions to a already pretty solid kit overall. If you look through the rest of Glenn's kit, he does have some, kind of niche options available, where he's got stuff like, Shockbuster, which is a good lightning sub weapon, but it does an AoE magic attack, which is fine. You've got the Jiggy Fam, which has a good magic earth potency weapon, but it doesn't do a lot of damage either. So you've got those 2 there if you're looking to help deal with ads. That's an option. Although Personal Style does a non-elemental attack, it's got water potency, so if you don't have Slay the Day at a higher overboost, this makes for a very good offhand weapon as an option for Glenn's water build. If you're looking for defenses up for your team, he does have Hardcore Squad, which gives this physical and magic defense all allies. It is only mid and it costs 5 ATB, which is why I didn't include it with really strange R abilities, right? Boost heal for Glenn when he doesn't have a heal all materia slot or even a heal in his kit is a little awkward. And then crit potency is fine, but like you don't really need crit potency for Glenn unless you're doing non-elemental damage. And even then, the non-elemental build that I posted, I'd prefer to just like try to improve my DPS overall versus building crit potency. So which is why I went with the crit potency, or went with the ability potency, R abilities instead of crit potency there. Because again, remember that although he doesn't get the extra physical attack for non-elemental, I did forget to mention this, there is no non-elemental damage increase on the attacker roll. So the only thing that Glenn is missing out on when building for non-elemental DPS is the extra 300 attack that you get from the overspeed, right? Other than that, and obviously the actual activation of the overspeed, which gives, I think, a 25% or 20% boost, I forget, I think it's 20%, which obviously Glenn wouldn't get, right? When he activates his overspeed, he gets defensive stats. So, but for the non-elemental stuff, remember that tanks, supports, etc., they can all do just as much damage as the attacker rolls. They're just a little bit farther behind in terms of total physical attack or magic attack because they don't get those full 300 boost from their overspeed rolls. Getting back into Glenn's kit, he also has like a decent fire weapon, 750% physical fire damage. This one's fine. I didn't build this one out because it doesn't really do that much right now, right? There are better physical fire weapons in the game, and Glenn would never really fill this role for you. It's still possible. You still could build a fire Glenn build with piece of cake in the offhand for a physical defense decrease, and it could work. Where like if you have this at OB10, it's 750% physical fire damage is not bad, but it's not that high either. And then when you go through the rest of his items, you've got Rest in Peace, which has a Diamond Sigil Break. The Stream Slasher is obviously better than this, and the R abilities are a little awkward on this one, but it's still fine. If you need a Diamond Sigil Break at 4 ATB, you can use this. It's there, right? Pumpkin Lamppost is a single target physical attack increase, which just isn't good in the game anymore, unfortunately. And the R abilities are a little weak, making it not a very attractive option. And then his last weapon is Apology in Hell, which again, solid physical damage, but not really that good. Ultimatic is clearly better than this. And then obviously Ultimatic also has better R abilities here, but the Ice Resist is a nice improvement. So if you need the Ice Resistance for a certain stage, say like Shiva as an example, and you want to get a little bit more damage with your crew kicker, you could have this in the offhand, boost his attack damage a little bit while also giving him some ice resistance so that he's able to tank one of those Diamond Dust attacks or the Heavenly Strike attack. Overall, like I said, Glenn is in a pretty weird spot right now for the things that he can do, meaning the ice tanking, the water tanking, and the physical support. These three builds, if you need him, he's very good in those stages, right? For the stages specifically that have single target damage, right? He'll be great. For everything else, he's kind of just he's kind of there, right? He's not really doing a whole lot. He's not really breaking the mold at all. Where like both Barret and Angeal have like ridiculously high ceilings. Glenn's is pretty capped because you really do need the featured weapons that have been released in 2025, including his most recent Earth weapon, which if you haven't seen my review, that video is here on YouTube, and you can always check that out for how I feel about his physical Earth weapon. Or Earth support weapon rather. I think he'll continue to get some improvement. I think that he's probably, of the three tanks, probably the lowest priority of the three tanks, just because again, he just doesn't do enough overall in his kit. But if you like Glenn and you really are enjoying the event, these are the builds that I would build for him. That's how I would build it. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comment section down below. If you like the video, make sure you like the video, comment, subscribe. I appreciate y'all hanging out. I hope y'all are enjoying the character guide videos. I'm going to try to release these every time a banner comes out. Obviously, it'll be posted as soon as I have time to get it recorded. For folks that don't know, I do live stream, and I am trying to, I've got a lot of stuff going on offline in my professional life. So as I continue to work on that stuff, I'll try to continue getting out these YouTube videos as soon as I can. And I hope that it helps people out. So yeah, I appreciate y'all. Hope y'all have a great rest of your day. And as always, we'll see you again in the next one. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.